Hello, so today we're going to be going over reading skills, and obviously reading skills are a critical component to being a college student because there's so much reading that has to be done. So it's important that you figure out your best strategy for reading and getting through all of that information, and not just reading it, but remembering it as well. All right. So your textbook, obviously you spend a lot of money on textbooks and you want to be using them and not just have them collecting dust or being a doorstop or something like that. So use your textbooks. They're going to help you be prepared for lecture. So it's important that you do your reading prior to going into that week's lecture. And so you're training your brain to know what it is that your instructor is going to be covering that week. And maybe you just do a quick skim. It doesn't even have to be a detailed reading, but just prepare yourself for that lecture. Your textbook's also going to provide pictures and diagrams and illustrations. And so those of you that are visual learners, you want to really dig into that information to better understand what is being presented in the book. It's going to give you practice questions and problems that can help you for studying. So spend time looking at that information. What does the author think is the most important information that you need to have for the lecture? You also are going to be able to use the textbook to review at your own pace. So you can go back to it as many times as you want. You can go as slow as you like. You can go as fast as you like. So it's not a race against other people. You can just use that textbook as a resource. It can also help you find answers to questions that you had during lecture. So what came up during lecture that you can look for those answers in the textbook. So being an active reader, this is a really important concept to understand. It's also something that you want to strive to be a part of. So just looking at this picture, if these people crossing this snowy mountain had showed up in shorts and without gloves, they obviously wouldn't be ready to go. And it's the same thing with being an active reader. You need to be ready to go. You need to be focused. You need to have your supplies. You need to figure out beforehand how much time will you be spending on reading. Is it going to be 20 minutes, or are you going to, have you already done a quick review and now you're really sitting down for, maybe an hour, taking 10-minute breaks within that hour to really focus in on what the chapter is telling you. So it's really important to become an active reader. So this is something that's available to you in the materials section of this week's class. And so what I'd like you to do is take a few minutes to either print this out or just read it and write down your numbers. And so what I want you to do is to check all of the following statements that are true for you, that apply to you. So number 1, I usually read straight through a textbook chapter from beginning to end without stopping. If that is something that you do, then write down number 1, or if you've printed it out, go ahead and put a check mark next to number 1. So read through, I think there's 16, yes, there's 16 different statements here. Read through all of those and decide which ones apply to you and write down those numbers. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Go ahead and pause the video and then come back. Okay. So you've completed reading each of these statements and decided which ones apply to you. And so as you read them, or as you read them, you decided which ones are a match for you. So number 4, when I hit a rough spot, I make a note to remind myself to ask about it in class. That is an active reader statement. And so if you do something like that, you're an active reader. Number 3, if I don't understand something I have read, I wait to hear the instructor's explanation in class. That's a passive reader. And so the odd numbers are passive reader statements and the even numbers are active readers. So if you had more positive numbers that you wrote down or put a check mark next to, you are on your way to becoming an active reader, which is great. If you had more odd numbers, you have a little bit of work to do, and you want to really focus in on the lecture today to figure out what you can do to make yourself more of an active reader. All right, so an active reader is going to read for ideas. A passive reader is reading only the words. They're not even concentrating. This is the student that kind of wakes up after reading for a while and goes, oh gosh, I have to go back and reread because I have no idea what I just spent, the last 10, 15 minutes reading. So they're really reading for the words, and they're reading without thinking. They're just doing it to get it done. The active reader is asking questions as they read. They also schedule their reading, and they control their concentration. Where a passive reader reads just when they quote unquote have time. And if you're doing that, you're most likely going to procrastinate. Reading textbooks is typically not that fun. It's not something that people really look forward to doing. And so if it's not scheduled, we kind of put it off. The passive reader also gets easily distracted. So again, their mind wanders. Maybe they start texting or looking at social media when they really should be focusing in on the reading. The active reader does something while they read. They're not just sitting there reading the words. They underline, they annotate, they have a system for reading. Where the passive reader, again, they're just reading, their books are not marked up, they don't ask questions, and they're not creating any type of system to make sure that important statements are highlighted or anything like that. The active reader is relating the information to what they already know, where the passive reader sees no connection. An active reader is going to go in and seek help. I didn't understand this. They ask questions. They go to their instructor or their fellow classmates to get assistance, where the passive reader doesn't. Because the active reader is doing all of this, they know what's going on in class. They're connected to what is happening in class. They know before they walk in the door what the lecture is going to be on because they've spent time reading, and the passive reader doesn't do that. So, what active reading strategies have you been using, and are those working for you? How does being an active reader help you? Second question here, what 3 strategies are you willing to try to start reading actively or be more of an active reader? So looking over the list, what things could you start doing, and start slow. Don't feel like you have to make a huge change overnight. That's when we don't succeed. So start with, 2 or 3 things to really start putting in. Maybe you start by scheduling your reading and you create a system for yourself to help you in becoming more of an active reader. Then add in 2 more once you're successful with those. So start slow. That's fine to do. Okay, so SQ3R, this is a system for reading. It's one that maybe you've tried before. Some people like it and some people don't. So that's true of everything that I'm teaching you in this class, is there's going to be some things that work for you and some things that don't. And so it's important that you try everything and see what works for me. There may be parts of SQ3R that work, but you don't want to do the whole thing, and that's fine. You have to determine what's going to make you be the most successful. So SQ3R stands for survey, question, read, recite, and review. So the first one is to survey. You need to prepare your mind for what's to come. Read the chapter summary first. Start in the back. It's the same thing if you go to a bookstore and you see a book that looks interesting to you. You turn it over and you read what the book is about. So it's the same thing with textbook reading. Go to the back and read the chapter summary first. When you go to the movies, you typically don't just stand outside the movie and say, what title sounds good to me? I think I'll go with that one. You've usually seen a trailer or somebody told you what the concept of the movie was about. And so your mind is prepared for what's to come. And it's the same thing with reading. You want to prepare your mind. So as you do the survey, you're going to start with that summary, then look over the table of contents, see what the learning objectives are, look at the review or discussion questions that the author has come up with, look at the key terms. What is the vocabulary that's being used? Do you understand that vocabulary? Look at headings, subheadings, and only read first sentences of each paragraph. So just do a summary. As you're doing this, pay attention to what you don't know. What is new information to you? Okay? After you do the survey, you're going to question. Prepare yourself. What do you already know about the information you're about to read? What don't you know? So really think about, okay, from that chapter summary, what do I need to figure out? What information do I want to learn more about? What do I don't need to spend as much time on? Because I've been taught about the Revolutionary War, since 5th grade, and I have a knack for history, so that's not something that I need to spend a lot of time on. So as you're going through the question, turn headings into questions. So if the heading is the Battle of Gettysburg, the question becomes, why was the Battle of Gettysburg important? Who was part of the Battle of Gettysburg? What were the dates of the Battle of Gettysburg? And so you're taking that one statement and turning it into questions. You can also turn statements into questions as you read. So the statement, many yellow and orange fruits and vegetables are a good source of vitamin A. The question becomes, how can you recognize foods that may be a good source of vitamin A? And so you may start doing flashcards. There is a flashcard system online that you can use that might be easier for you than handwriting flashcards, might be faster. You could also just write this right into your book. So take advantage of your book. You bought it. They will take it back with it being highlighted and written in. And so take that time to really annotate and mark questions in there for yourself. It's going to help you when it comes time to preparing for the exam. Now you're ready to read. So you've done the survey, you've created questions for yourself. You're reading with a purpose. You're actively searching to answer the questions you've asked. You have lecture notes and study guides out from the past. Use 2 colors to highlight. Do not highlight as you read. You want to read and then go back and highlight what is important. Maybe you're just picking out key words. You don't want to highlight an entire passage. That's not going to do anything to help you because you're going to have to go back and reread that entire passage. So the 2 color system is you have a primary color and a secondary color. The primary color is going to cover concepts, equations, statements. The secondary is going to highlight examples, results, data, case studies, things that support the concepts, equations, and statements. So that might be something that works for you. As you're reading, you're trying to figure out, what is the main idea here? What does the author want me to understand? What could the instructor ask about this on an exam? Looking at what don't I understand? What doesn't make sense to me? Again, using a system for yourself. Things that are important, use an exclamation mark. Things that you don't understand, use a question mark. Dates, put a pound sign next to. So what system could you create for yourself? If there are words you don't know, circle them and look them up. It can change the entire concept of the sentence if you don't know the definition of something. So take that time to really look that up and not just bypass it. Then you're going to recite. So after a section of reading, try to state in your own words what you've read. If you can't do this, you probably don't understand it. And so really taking the time to recite information out loud. Quiz yourself from the questions that you've created. And again, doing it out loud. I know you're going to feel funny, but just you can hear yourself and it sticks more. Take notes while you read, and those you can turn into something to study off of. Create an outline for yourself to study from. Those of you who are kinesthetic and visual, draw out information. Create a picture for yourself so that you can use that to study off of as well. Then you have your review. So your reading should be finished at least 2 days before an exam. Reading is not studying. Let me say that again. Reading is not studying. So you really want to take the time to have the reading done prior so that you can go back and use that information that you've created to study off of. So using your questions that you've created without looking at the book for the answers. Read your chapter summary and the review questions to test yourself. Having those flashcards ready to go. And so really doing a good review prior to the exam is going to help you. And when we get into test taking, we'll talk about the importance of not just studying one day before for the test, but spending time doing that review. All right, there's also the Spunky system. So what parts of the reading did you find surprising, puzzling, useful, new, you knew it already, or interesting? So kind of making a game out of this for yourself and picking out that information for yourself. You might find this as a better system. So again, using what's useful to you. Maybe there's parts of SQ3R that you want to use. Maybe there's parts of Spunky that you want to use. So again, creating a system that works well for you. For your math and science textbooks, your math textbooks are going to include more symbols and formulas and proofs. And so creating, a sheet for yourself where you have that information. Doing the exercises in your textbook. Don't memorize, but understand the steps to solving a problem. What are each of those steps and what does it mean? In your science textbooks, it's important to understand the concepts and the terms, not just definitions, but understanding what those concepts and terms mean. Really doing a good underline or highlight or outline of the chapter. So again, whatever system is going to be useful to you is what you want to incorporate into reading math and science textbooks. All right, so we've already talked about waiting to highlight until you've read. It's important that you do that so you can really pick out the most important things that you want to try to remember. Read with a friend. Discuss the information. What does it mean? Explain information to somebody. If you can explain it, that's going to be huge. Don't read every word. Read in chunks. That's going to help you to go a little bit faster. If you're having a hard time concentrating, take 5 minutes to free write. Get it out of your head. I tell people this all the time. If it's stirring around in your head, it's just going to stay there. So get it out. Write it down. Share it with somebody to kind of free yourself of whatever it is taking over. Know that it's okay to skip passages. Your textbook could be, 60, 80, 120 pages long for a chapter, and you do not need to read all of that. So figuring out what you want to skip is okay. Now, if you skip something and your teacher spent a lot of time covering it, then you obviously may want to go back and read that information. There's going to be parts of the chapter that you have to read more than once. This does not mean that you're stupid or you don't know something. It takes time for concepts to sink in, and so don't worry about it if you have to read something 2 or 3 times for it to sink in. That's okay. And again, write in your books. It's yours. Use it as a resource so that you can go back to it and look at those questions, look at those highlights, look at your system so that it can assist you through the study process.